Chapter 4, Measurement, Assessment, and Ethical AI Application. Abstract. This chapter advances quiet excellence from a normative ethical framework into a measurable, accessible, and institutionally governable model suitable for doctoral research, public administration, and ethical AI oversight. It confronts a central dilemma in ethics and governance: how to evaluate embodied regulation, ethical presence, and lawful restraint without reducing them to coercive metrics or surveillance regimes. Integrating leadership assessment, organizational ethics, legal theory, and ethical AI governance, the chapter proposes a principled, multi-layered measurement architecture grounded in nonviolence, consent, and dignity. Quiet excellence is positioned not as a performance score to be optimized, but as an ethical capacity to be observed, protected, cultivated, and reviewed across human and AI-mediated systems. Keywords: quiet excellence, ethical measurement, lawful transparency, restraint, ethical AI, leadership evaluation, human flourishing. 4.1 Recentering the reader. Quiet excellence as a measurable ethical framework. Before introducing specific assessment mechanisms, it is essential to restate the core logic of quiet excellence as it applies to measurement. Quiet excellence holds that ethical leadership is defined not by influence or output, but by the regulated, lawful, and nonviolent exercise of power. Accordingly, assessment must focus on how decisions are made, constrained, and reviewed, rather than on how effectively outcomes are imposed. Within this framework, measurement serves three purposes: 1. Safeguarding dignity and consent; 2. Supporting ethical learning and institutional maturity; and 3. Preventing the concentration or abuse of power. Measurement is therefore inseparable from governance and law. It must be designed to strengthen restraint, not reward domination. 4.2 The measurement challenge in ethical leadership and governance. Ethical leadership frameworks frequently encounter their greatest vulnerability at the point of implementation. Values may be articulated with philosophical rigor, yet mechanisms for evaluation and accountability remain underdeveloped or misaligned with the ethics they seek to uphold. In practice, institutions default to metrics that prioritize speed, productivity, visibility, and control, indicators poorly suited to capturing restraint, consent protection, and harm prevention. This mismatch produces a structural contradiction. Leaders are rhetorically encouraged to act ethically while materially rewarded for behaviors that erode ethical containment. Quiet excellence addresses this contradiction by asserting that ethical leadership must be measurable, but only through methods that remain lawful, contextual, and non-coercive. Measurement is thus not a technical add-on, but a moral design problem. 4.3 Ethical risks of conventional metrics. Conventional leadership metrics privilege decisiveness, persuasion, and efficiency. While such indicators may correlate with short-term outcomes, they are ethically hazardous when detached from regulation and consent. Over-reliance on these metrics incentivizes performative authority, suppresses dissent, and normalizes coercive decision-making. From the perspective of quiet excellence, the primary failure of conventional metrics is ethical misalignment. Metrics that reward domination or unilateral action undermine the very capacities, restraint, reflection, accountability, that prevent violence and preserve trust. Ethical assessment must therefore reject evaluative regimes that instrumentalize human behavior or reduce moral agency to numerical proxies. 4.4 Principles for measuring quiet excellence. Measurement within the quiet excellence framework is governed by 5 non-negotiable principles. First, non-coercion. Assessment must never compel compliance, extract obedience, or penalize vulnerability. Second, lawful transparency. Criteria, procedures, and consequences must be explicit, reviewable, and aligned with legal standards. Third, context sensitivity. Indicators must be interpreted within cultural, institutional, and situational realities. Fourth, developmental orientation. Assessment must support ethical learning rather than ranking or shaming. Fifth, reversibility and review. All tools must remain contestable and withdrawable if they generate harm. These principles ensure that measurement reinforces quiet excellence rather than undermining it. 4.5 Domains of observable ethical capacity. Although quiet excellence resists reduction to scores, it can be evaluated through stable domains of observable ethical capacity. 5 domains are proposed. Regulation under pressure evaluates tolerance for uncertainty, delayed action, and emotional containment. Consent integrity examines participatory processes, protected dissent, and absence of retaliation. Boundary adherence assesses respect for role limits, due process, and escalation pathways. Lawful accountability focuses on documentation, auditability, and openness to review. Harm prevention evaluates whether foreseeable risks are identified and mitigated prior to action. Each domain may be examined through mixed qualitative methods such as peer review, process audits, case reconstruction, and reflective supervision. 4.6 A Quiet Excellence Measurement Compass. To support institutional adoption, these domains may be visualized as a quiet excellence measurement compass. Each domain represents a directional ethical capacity, while its opposite pole represents a predictable risk. Reactivity, coercion, boundary collapse, opacity, or preventable harm. The compass metaphor emphasizes orientation rather than optimization, guiding leaders and institutions toward ethical alignment rather than performance maximization. 4.7 A Multi-Level Assessment Architecture. Quiet excellence operates across interconnected levels. Assessment must therefore be distributed rather than centralized. At the individual level, reflective practice, mentoring, and supervised feedback assess regulation and ethical reasoning. At the organizational level, policies, decision pathways, grievance mechanisms, and consent protections are evaluated. At the systemic level, governance structures are reviewed for transparency, accountability, and resistance to power concentration. This architecture prevents the personalization of systemic failure and reinforces shared ethical responsibility. 4.8 Measurement without surveillance. A central ethical danger in assessment is the drift toward surveillance. Surveillance-based measurement erodes trust, amplifies fear, and paradoxically increases unethical behavior. Quiet excellence explicitly rejects monitoring regimes that score or rank individuals without consent or due process. Instead, assessment emphasizes process over personality. Decisions, safeguards, and institutional designs are evaluated more rigorously than individual traits. This orientation aligns ethical measurement with democratic governance and the rule of law. 4.9 Quiet excellence and ethical AI governance. As authority increasingly migrates into algorithmic and AI-mediated systems, ethical measurement becomes more urgent. AI systems do not possess moral agency or presence. They materialize the ethical capacity of the humans and institutions that design and deploy them. Applying quiet excellence to ethical AI governance involves assessing whether systems respect data dignity and consent, include meaningful human oversight, provide explainability and contestability, comply with jurisdictional law, and incorporate harm prevention thresholds rather than pure optimization. Measurement thus evaluates ethical responsibility expressed through systems, not machine intelligence itself. 4.10 Case Analyses. Measuring restraint in AI-driven contexts. Public sector allocation system. Beyond accuracy, assessment examines whether individuals can challenge outcomes, whether deployment can be paused, and whether escalation pathways exist when harm emerges. Educational technology platform. Quiet excellence evaluates whether algorithmic recommendations constrain student autonomy, whether consent is revocable, and whether educators retain authority to override automated decisions. In each case, restraint, the design capacity not to act, is treated as a measurable ethical feature. 4.11 Crisis, emergency, and ethical shortcuts. Crisis conditions often justify ethical shortcuts in the name of urgency. Quiet excellence rejects the suspension of ethical measurement during emergencies. Instead, it requires heightened attention to consent, proportionality, and lawful oversight, particularly in public health, security, or disaster response systems. 4.12 Teaching, training, and institutional adoption. Quiet excellence assessment tools can be integrated into leadership education and governance training through scenario analysis, reflective journals, ethical red flag checklists, and legal case studies. Such tools emphasize learning and accountability rather than compliance. Institutions must model the ethical standards they assess. Measurement regimes that violate consent or transparency undermine legitimacy and reproduce harm. 4.13 Intercultural and cross-jurisdictional considerations. Ethical capacity and lawful accountability are culturally and legally situated. Quiet excellence measurement must therefore be calibrated across jurisdictions and cultural norms while remaining anchored in universal principles of dignity, consent, and nonviolence. This calibration is essential for global leadership and AI governance. 4.14 Limitations and Future Research Directions. This chapter does not claim to offer a final measurement solution. Future research may empirically test the proposed domains, explore cross-cultural variation, and examine integration with emerging AI governance standards and legal regimes. 4.15 Conclusion: Measuring what protects dignity. This chapter has demonstrated that quiet excellence can be measured without being diminished. Through principled, multi-level, and law-aligned assessment, ethical leadership becomes observable while remaining humane. In extending quiet excellence into ethical measurement and AI governance, the framework completes its transition from moral vision to durable practice, protecting dignity, preventing harm, and guiding power toward lawful and life-sustaining ends.